I wore a face that wasn't mine and still learned to speak with my own mouth. That's the truth you came for, isn't it? The part people whisper about. The mask, the rituals, the bride who never was. I'll give you that, but you should know what firelight does to a story. It softens the edges, licks at the splinters, makes even ugly things look warm for a moment. Don't be fooled by the warmth. The heat here is honest, yes, but it's also hungry. The same way Ebisugaoka's fog was, creeping, patient, pretending to be a blanket while it ate the world a step at a time. Listen, hear that snap? Pine sap trapped in a log. It reminds me of summer at the shrine, when incense seethed in the air and the old priest tapped ash from a stick with the same bored fingers he'd used to count coins. The smoke back then smelled like oranges. Tonight it smells like old paper and damp bark, and underneath it, faint but stubborn, the sickly sweetness of red spider lilies. I swear I still catch them sometimes, even here, even now. Maybe their scent crawled under my skin and never left. Or maybe the world just keeps flowering with what it thinks I'll understand. I'm Hinako Shimizu. Say it with me if you want. Sometimes I have to. I am Hinako. I am also Hinako. I used to repeat that like a charm when the world tilted and the floor slid away. Names are hooks. You can hold fast to a hook even while everything else is water. People like to start with the fancy parts. They want monsters and masks and the way the fox's arm moved like it had always been mine. They want the iron, the hiss of fat on skin, the wetting white that gleamed like a knife. But if you start there, you miss the slow work. You miss the years. I was born where the mountains cupped the town like they forgot to let go in a house that couldn't keep heat. My father drank the space between words. My mother knew how to fold silence into neat shapes and put them on shelves. I learned early that there are noises that count as talking and noises that don't. The clink of bottles counts. So does the squeal of the back door when someone leaves too fast. Crying doesn't count. It makes him louder, so you learn not to do it. I was cheerful once. That's funny, right? People forget that about me. They see the girl who hardly smiles and think I was born with corners in my mouth. But there was a time I shouted across rice fields, mud hugging my ankles, dragonflies making jeweled lines over the water. There was a time I laughed with my whole body. Ask Shu. He called me partner long before we figured out what that meant. We climbed the levee and pointed at boats we swore would take us somewhere else. We invented space wars with pebbles and old radio static. We were bold at 10 in ways we weren't allowed to be at 15. 15. That year tasted like iron. It tasted like old coins and the brim of a cup you didn't want to drink from. Junko, my sister, was already gone by then. Married away, her name bent into someone else's family registry. She visited once and I didn't recognize her voice. It was hers, but softened, like cloth worn thin in the wash. I loved her. I wanted to shake her and ask if the hollow shape fit well. I didn't. I held my breath and nodded when she told me about having to get up before dawn to grind sesame. I told her I was tall for my age. It felt important to say that. Something I could own. It's stupid, but when you have nothing, an inch matters. My father had debts. People murmured numbers when they thought I wasn't listening. People always think girls aren't listening. He gambled what he didn't have on the hope that a different future would come if he held his breath long enough. When the collectors came with polite bows and bad eyes, they didn't look at our cupboards. They looked at me. It doesn't take a ledger to sell a daughter, just a smile and a stamp. Tsuneki Kotoyuki. We used to throw stones at the same swallows. He left after the bite. You know the story. A fox god chose him. Or he chose a story to make sense of the mark and the fevers, and the way adults went quiet when he entered the room. In Ebisugaoka, everything is a mask before it's a face. He wore his well, When he came back, he had edges where a boy used to be. He had a voice like lacquer, smooth until it cracked. This is where I say I refused, that I threw the ledger in the fire and walked out into the fog with my chin high and my fist up. I didn't. I said, I hate this. What? Number. I'm not doing this, and my voice shook so hard it made the bowls on the shelf tremble. I stormed out because storming was what I could manage. It's what any animal does when the walls inch closer. Shu found me. He always did. He pressed a red capsule into my palm and closed my fingers around it like a secret. For your headaches, partner. His eyes were too bright. He wanted to help. He wanted to fix it. Maybe he also wanted to keep me where he could reach me. The thing about love at 15 is that it doesn't know the difference between rescue and possession. Adults don't know either. They just pretend better. The capsule dissolved bitter and sweet. The world softened at the edges. The fog had been hanging low that morning, thickening as the day wore on, pooling in the dips of the road like it was tired and wanted to lie down. After the pill, the fog was not just weather. It was a door. It had hinges I couldn't see but could feel under my skin. I stepped through because the other side smelled like not home. I don't know if you've ever needed not home so badly that the word alone could be a rope. I did. I grabbed and pulled. Ebisugaoka changed, or I changed and the town obliged. Paper lanterns bled light like fruit. The sound of geta on stone turned into teeth on glass. Red spider lilies punched through cracks in the road and swayed like they were breathing. I knew their meaning. Everyone does. Death. Farewell. The old women who tend graves leave them like small fires, one for each name that can't answer anymore. But these lilies weren't offerings. They were colonizers. They came for everything, even the places where children dared each other to jump from rock to rock. The shrine became a nest, then a wound, then something deeper, like the root system of a tree that had learned to grow on blood. We called it the dark shrine because the other words, inner, underside, back room, felt too honest. Names can confess, names can also lie. Dark shrine felt like a lie I could live with for a while. I made lists in my head like I do when I need to order the world. Altar, corridor, room with dolls, chamber with hooks, a place where a mask was a face was a law. You want to ask about Fox Mask? I'll get there. First, my friends. Rinko, precise as a ruler, keeping to lines she believed would save her from getting lost. Sakuko, the shrine maiden whose hair smelled like smoke and pine needles, who giggled behind her sleeve as if her laughter might bite if let loose. We were 4 points on a crooked square, held together by old games and walking paths and the way we all pretended we didn't see the future coming. We said things like always as if time liked being told what to do. Sakuko died first. I can't say that gently. She died because the lilies were more beautiful than good. She ate what looked like a blessing and found the poison underneath. When the first spasm took her, I thought she was dancing. I thought she was making the face she made when she had to sneeze but wanted to be polite. Then she made a sound like a hand sliding down a paper door, and her knees knocked together, and then the floor very softly said yes to her body. I held her. I said her name. The fog said nothing back. After that, everything braided tighter. The other world pulled, and we were thin rope. I wrote a lot then. Journals can be a trapdoor or a scaffold, and you don't know which until you step. I wrote with a calm mind and a clear heart, the way I told myself in a margin once, like a school rule I'd invented. The letters slanted more as the days went on. Sometimes I'd open the book and the words would be different than I remembered. My own hand betraying me, or the book proving it was more honest than I was. I screamed on paper because screaming with my mouth had never helped me. On paper, I could say, I hate you, Mother. I never want to be like you. On paper, I could confess that I wanted to run in every direction at once, and that I didn't know which counted as bravery. Fox Mask waited for me in the dark shrine like he'd been carved there. He spoke without moving his mouth. That's not magic, that's theater. But it felt like magic then because I wanted it to be. He guided me the way a hand guides a needle. Do this, now this, for your sake, for mine, for ours. He was gentle the way a blade can be gentle when it is well made. He said I was chosen. It is astonishing how easily chosen can be used to mean owned. He took my right arm, or I gave it to him. The memory is teeth on wood, the way you bite down when the midwife says push, and I've never done that, but I've heard the sounds women make and they live in the same dark hall. The cut was quick. The aftermath was not. Something new slid into the place that had been mine. Sinew that moved like a fox thinks. Fur that knew which way the wind stank. Claws that tapped secrets from stone. I flexed, and the world flexed back. It felt like power because I'd had so little. It felt like wearing a face people looked at without looking away. I loved it for a day. Maybe 2. Then I learned what gifts cost. Rinko watched me with that pinched mouth she gets when Shu laughs at a joke that wasn't hers to hear. She wanted me to fit inside the lines she'd boxed around me, nice and tidy, obedient as tea. When she saw the arm, she made a noise she thought was disgust, but was mostly curiosity with no place to hide. She asked if it hurt. I said I didn't know. I have no idea. This was true and false. Pain is a language. New bodies don't speak it the same. Shu's eyes did that wide thing again. The red capsules burned in my pocket like coals. I had sworn I wouldn't take any more. Then I did. I won't be told what to do, I said later to nobody, because the only person trying to tell me anything that mattered was me. Shu said partner in the way he does when he wants me to believe the whole world is just the 2 of us and a convenience store radio and a pack of gum we didn't pay for. I wanted to believe him so badly that I let the word draw a circle around us and pretended the rest of it couldn't cross. The branding came next. You can smell iron when it's red. You can taste it too, in the back of your throat, the way a coin leaves a ghost on your tongue. They pressed our family crest between my shoulder blades and said words I don't remember, because my skull was full of light. The line between sacred and cruel is thin as tissue. People always fold both into ceremony. It makes it easier to bow. After, I lay on the stone and counted breaths like beads. 1 to not cry, 2 to not scream, 3 to not call out for my mother the way children do when they've cut their knees and the blood is more than a law allows. I haven't cried since I was little, Shu said once, as if it were an accomplishment, and I nodded like it was something to be proud of. It isn't. It's just another mask we're told to wear until the skin beneath it forgets what air feels like. I thought of Junko then. Her hands smelled like soap and rice. She braided my hair so tight that my eyes felt wider. She left. She told me marrying meant being taken care of, and I wanted to ask. By whom? A man? A family? A mask? I didn't ask. We keep our questions in our mouths like cherry pits, hard and round, and spit them into the grass when no one is looking. If you're waiting for me to say I forgave her, I can't. Not yet. Maybe never. I understand her now. That's different. Understanding is a door. Forgiveness is a room. I'm not ready to sit down inside it. The monster in the white bridal kimono found us by the river. She moved like memory, slow when you looked straight at her, fast when you glanced away. Her sleeves dragged and stained, and I thought stupidly about my mother scolding me for wet hems. Then the sleeve lifted, and I saw what I didn't want to see. I saw the shape of my own jaw under that veil. I saw the set of my stubborn mouth. I saw the way her head cocked when she was confused. She was me, or I was her, if I squinted wrong. People talk about encountering themselves like it's poetic. It isn't. It's like catching sight of your reflection at night in the kitchen window and lunging at it with a knife because for a second you believe a stranger has come to take your salt. We ran. Rinko tripped. Shu grabbed her elbow. I hated him a little then for the way he is good. It's easier to be angry at someone who saves people you were ready to leave behind. I grabbed Sakuko's bells from where they'd fallen in the mud. They chimed, and the sound was thin and brave. I wanted to stuff the bells in my ears so I wouldn't have to hear anything else. Fox Mask told me I had to sever ties. He said childhood is a thread, and if you don't cut it clean, it will strangle you. He said killing is a kind of kindness if what you kill is the part of you that can't move forward. He said many things, all of them plausible, all of them dressed in language that smelled like cedar. It's the easiest thing in the world to believe a lie that uses the words you were taught to respect. I didn't kill my friends, not the way the shrine wanted me to, but I thought about it. That's an uglier confession than most people admit. Dark shrines don't need your blood to stain you. They just need your consent. A nod can be louder than a scream. I said no. What? Number. I'm not doing this. And for once the words were rocks, not breath. He nodded like a teacher when you finally solve for X. The town would not let go. Fog in your mouth, fog in your ears, fog in the spaces where the names of streets used to be. The old grannies kept sweeping the shrine steps long after there were no steps to sweep, their brooms moving rhythmically against nothing. I watched their hands and thought about every woman who's ever been told that repetitive motion is holiness. My mother polished our floor until you could skate on it. She said it calmed her. She meant it made her disappear. I tried to leave. Junko would have called it running away. Shu would have called it a plan. Rinko called it selfish. Fox Mask called it impossible. I called it air. At the town's edge, the fog thickened to a kind of wall, and if you pressed your ear to it, you could hear breath on the other side. The breath was mine. The wall was mine. I stood there for a long time with my fox hand against the damp, feeling the way it flexed and pushed on its own, as if it wanted to climb the fog like a tree. Power purrs. If you've never had any, the first purrs are the hardest to ignore. The last ritual was the face. This is where most people lean in, pupils big, mouths a little open. I won't give you every detail. I'll give you what matters to me. Cold metal against cheekbone. Fingers that held the way fathers hold rules. The slice. The sound wasn't wet the way you think. It was clean. There's a difference. Clean is for altars and kitchens. Clean is for hospitals and weddings. They put the fox on me, the top half neat as a lid. It wasn't heavy. That was the worst part. Weight would have made it honest. When you take a girl's face, you think you have taken her voice. They forgot I learned to speak in rooms where talking got you hurt. They forgot I used my eyes to say more than my mouth ever did. They forgot names can be hooks even without lips to form them. I spoke anyway. Not out loud at first, in the part of your head where counting happens. I said my name once, twice, a dozen times until the inside of the mask echoed with it the way shells hold the sea. I am Hinako. I am also Hinako. The words didn't fix anything. They just made a place to stand. Fox Mask, Kodayuki, touched the edge of the mask where it met my skin. He said, chosen again. I said it back to him without letting it change shape inside me. He had been bitten by a story long before he bit me with it. He wore his role like a robe that fit better than a shirt ever had. Then later, when the truth peeled up at the corners, I saw the bruise under his mask, the way duty leaves marks on men too. Just in colors people applaud. He was forced as neatly as I was. He was carved as cleanly. That doesn't absolve, it explains. Explanations are doors. absolutions or baths. I wasn't interested in being made clean. I wanted out. Shu came to the shrine one night with his heart beating like it thought it could punch its way through his ribs. He had an idea, which is to say he had desperation in a new hat. He said we could run. He said we didn't have to be what the town wanted. I almost said yes just because I love when a plan arrives with gravel still on its knees. Then I thought of Rinko's mouth. I thought of my mother's floor. I thought of Junko's soft voice. I thought of Kotoyuki's bruise. I thought of Sakuko's bells. I thought of how many women had run before me and discovered the town inside their bones followed under a different name. I told him no. And then I told him yes. And then I told him I didn't know. I have no idea. He called me partner like it was a spell. It worked and didn't. Some days I was 10 again. Some days I was old enough to feel my knees forecast weather. We stood together in a corridor that smelled like the inside of a fox pelt. I held his sleeve and thought, even if we run, where will we go where I am not also this? The shrine gave me visions the way drunk uncles give advice. Some useful, most sticky with other people's expectations. I saw my sister telling me to finish it, to let the fox part of me swallow the human part, so at least one of us would know what to do each morning. I saw myself in a white kimono that ate every color. I saw the lilies filling our house until the floor bowed. I saw the old water dragon under the hot spring turning lazily in his own poison and smiling because everything above him tasted like arsenic already. Ebisugaoka loves its gods because gods explain why the water makes your teeth ache. I know that, and still, when I stood over the spring, the steam touching my new skin, I felt like someone was breathing for me. I kept writing. My journal looked like it had been pulled out of a fire and slapped into a puddle. Pages stuck and then tore as if nothing wanted to be held in order anymore. Words moved around when I looked away. Sometimes a sentence I thought I'd written in anger showed up later with its teeth filed down. Sometimes an apology I was sure I'd never make appeared in neat characters in a corner. The book was arguing with me, or I'd begun to argue with myself in ink because it's easier to see your enemy when she's written down. Rinko tried to slap me once. She missed because I stepped back. She cried after, furious at herself for being the kind of girl who missed. She said I was ruining Shu. I asked what that meant. She said he had a future until I dragged him into mine. I said a future that doesn't allow for my existence isn't a future I'm interested in. The sentence sounded smarter than I felt. She told me not everything needed my opinion. I told her the inside of my skull had been full of other people's opinions for so long that now they rattled when I walked. There is a thing people don't like to talk about, and I will say it because I promised myself I would not be polite anymore. Sometimes I hated all of them. The town, my mother, Rinko, Shu, Kotoyuki, Junko most of all, because I loved her most of all. Hatred is a hot room. You can't live in it, but you can warm your hands for a minute. I did. Then I left the room before it made me stupid. You want me to tell you about the moment I became certain. I can point to a place, but it won't sound like thunder. It will sound like the click of a latch. I was sitting on the steps of the shrine's back hall, fox arm limp, human shoulder aching where the brand pulled tight. The lilies had pushed up between the stones, and their petals were brushing my bare ankle like a cat begging. The bell from the street vendor down in the market drifted up, thin and stubborn. My journal lay open to a page I didn't remember writing. It said, pick, not choose. Pick a small word. Farmers use it. Men use choose when they want to sound important. Women use pick because we know sometimes you take what's ripe and hope the frost waits one more night. I picked. I decided I would not let the town's story be my only story. I also decided I would not become a ghost who only knew how to say no. There is a third path. People think in two because it's clean. Life likes three. I said my name twice, I said partner to myself like a joke and a prayer. I stood up. I went to find Kotoyuki. He looked tired. Not perform tired, bone tired. The kind of tired that sits on the floor with its back to your door and doesn't ask to come in. He touched the mask again, featherlight, and said, chosen, like a reflex. I said, we were, weren't we? By people we didn't pick, by ghosts we didn't invite. He looked at me as if I'd peeled something off his face with words. We talked the way people do when their throats hurt from being silent too long. We didn't forgive each other. We didn't claim we could fix what had fixed us. We just said, not this, not like this. We said later. We said maybe. We said if we ever have a chance to meet as people and not as roles, we should try. Sometimes that's all you can do. Sometimes it's enough. If you're waiting for a neat line, there isn't one. If you want a slogan, you won't get it. I don't owe anyone that kind of clean. I owe the dead. The girl with bells, the girl with rules, the woman who taught me how to braid, the parts of me I burned, something harder. I owe them the truth that feels like splinters when you pick it up. And yet, here by this fire, I can say a few things plain. I won't be told what to do. My choices are my own. Those words mean more when you have swallowed things you didn't pick. They mean more when you've had a face pressed to yours and been told to call it your own. They mean more when you have loved someone who pressed a bright red pill into your palm and said, trust me, and you did, and it led you into a tunnel lined with teeth and glass. I keep thinking about the water dragon. The old story says he turned in his spring for centuries, making the water bad to remind us of a debt we owed. But maybe he was just used to his own poison. You can live in anything long enough to think it's home. That's what frightens me most about Ebisugaoka. Not the monsters, not the fog, not even the lilies with their beautiful lethal tongues. It's the way we all learned to breathe something that hurt us and then argued with anyone who opened a window. I opened one. That's all. I didn't break the house down. Not yet. I am not a saint or a hero or a cautionary tale that fits comfortably in a pamphlet. I am a girl who was tall for her age and learned to stop smiling because it invited hands. I am a girl who put on a mask and still said her name until the mask had to answer too. I am a girl who loved her partner and told him no, and then yes, and then no again, because yes and no are not doors. You walk through once. They are steps you keep taking, and sometimes you take them in place until your legs burn, and then suddenly you are somewhere else, and you don't remember when the landscape changed. The fire is lower. The wood we started with is blackened, cored, easier to break. That's how it goes. You burn, and then you become fuel for smaller flames that still matter. My fox hand, don't look for it. It isn't there anymore the way it was. Still remembers how to read the air. I can feel a shift like weather inside my bones. There's more to tell. I haven't talked about the hall with the dolls whose eyes never blink. I haven't told you how the sacred sword sang quietly when my fingers hovered above it, as if it were humming a lullaby it half remembered from a mother it never had. I haven't told you how Rinko learned to stop measuring me by the lines she loved and started using her ruler on herself. I haven't told you the worst thing I did and the best thing I did, and how they looked almost the same from a distance. The room with the paper walls waited where breath collects in a house. You know that pocket at the base of a throat where a sob hides? The shrine had that, and someone skinned a room out of it. The paper wasn't paper, it had pores. If you leaned close, your own heat drew little beads of moisture to the surface as if the wall were nervous. The lamps on the floor made the seams glow like scars. Dolls sat along the far length on low benches, their knees matched, their silk stiff from dust and incense. Their glass eyes were clever liars. I kept looking for the blink that never came and kept thinking I saw it anyway. The first time I entered, my fox hand lifted without me telling it to, palm outward like you do to calm a dog. The air pressed back. That's how I knew the room was listening. The central panel slid open by itself. A bride stepped through. The cloth over her face hung heavy, beaded with something that caught the light like dew and smelled wrong. Sweet sour, the way red lilies smell after they've been cut and left too long in a warm room. She lifted her head and the beads clicked. Not pearls. Teeth, small and milky as if 100 children had traded their losses for gifts, and the gift had been me. I spoke first. I said my name once, level, like laying down a length of string. The bride stopped. I said, I am also Hinako, the second line parallel to the first. The strings made a ladder. Her foot slid back half a step. Good. A monster has to decide which rung to put weight on. That's when it slips. Fox Mask stood behind me with his hands folded as if he were visiting rather than officiating. He said nothing. He liked to let silence make the offer. I told the bride what I should have told every altar that asked for me. I won't be told what to do. My choices are my own. Then I ruined the sentence deliberately. I said, help me, softly, not to her, to myself, and to anything in the room that remembered a girl who ran mud-slick between patties and shouted at swallows. Rudeness can make a wall. Asking can make a door. The dolls' heads turned together. That sound, ceramic on wood, is a sound you remember with your teeth. Beneath the benches, a low grate rattled. Warm air and something like a breath pushed across my ankles. Fox Mask tapped his knuckles once on the sill. He'd taught me that as a child. Always greet the room that keeps your back. I had forgotten. The room had not. There was a sword on a stand near the back, lacquer rubbed thin where fingers had remembered it for generations. I didn't touch it. The first rule I made for myself in the shrine was this: do not grab the thing that looks exactly like the answer. Answers like that are bait. Instead, I went to the furthest doll, the one with a chip on her lip, and straightened her collar. It had been folded the wrong way, revealing the world instead of concealing it. In our place, you say a woman's collar speaks before she does. I covered hers and whispered, there. She hadn't asked to show anything. The paper breathed out. The bride stepped sideways, and the seam behind her widened enough to pass a body of my size, but not my fear. Fox Mask nodded at the space, not at me. He would call this progress. I call it courtesy learned late. When I slid through, the floor changed from cedar to something like packed petals. It gave, faintly, as if I walked on promises. The hall bent twice and twice again, and ended in a small square with no shrine, only a low table and 2 bowls of rice set opposite each other with chopsticks laid parallel and a gap between them like a road. My mother used to set the table like that when my father was out late. 2 bowls like hope rehearsing itself. I sat. I ate my bowl. Then I rotated the other bowl halfway so the steam lined up with mine. The air warmed. The sound of a river moved through the walls the way blood remembers it once was a stream. She would have said this was beautiful. He always was better at naming beauty than surviving it. I was learning to do both. When I returned to the doll room, the sword hummed. Not out loud, just in the space between my teeth and tongue where words line up. I didn't take it then either. I brushed past its stand and took the empty scabbard from the wall. I wrapped the scabbard in cloth and put it across my back as if it were a sleeping child. The sword calmed. Sometimes a blade wants the promise of a home more than a hand. Rinko found me outside on the corridor that looks down into the market. The fog parted just enough to see the vendor ringing his bell for roasted chestnuts, a sound that makes winter bearable. Rinko's hair was loose. I had never seen it that way. She looked both older and younger, as if she had set down everyone else's expectations for a minute and wasn't sure where to put her own. She told me I scared her, not the monsters. Me. She said my face made her feel like the answers she'd memorized for every test might not be the ones the teacher wanted. I told her I didn't know what the teacher wanted anymore either. I have no idea. We laughed exactly once, and then looked away, embarrassed by the relief. She asked about Shu. Of course she did. I said he was trying. She said trying wasn't the same as listening. I said I was trying to listen to myself. She said about time, and the kindness in it made me want to hand her every sharp thing I carried so she could hold them for me for a while. I didn't. We are learning to help each other in ways that don't erase either of us. That takes more than one conversation. Someone set a wedding date, not on a calendar, in air. It pressed against the skin the way humidity does before a storm. The lilies nodded like, yes, yes, yes. The old men who sit squatting outside the shop with crushed tobacco in their lower lips started pinching their fingers as if counting coin. Doors slid open and closed at odd hours. The town turns into a machine when it prepares to swallow a girl. Each neighborhood knows which gear it is, and no one wants to hear the grind. Fox Mask brought me to a hall with mirrors on both sides, warped just enough to make you distrust your bones. He said we were going to reconcile what was fractured. He gestured, and the mirrors filled with my faces. The child with cut knees, the teenager with her mouth set like flint, the bride with another thing's eyes, the woman with a stranger's hands, the fugitive I could become if I let red capsules write my script in chalk. Each image breathed, each one looked tired in my own ways. He said pick. There it was again. My word. He thought it was his. I let him think that for a moment. He'd had to do that his whole life too, build a path out of someone else's grammar. I touched the glass where the child was making a paper boat out of her schoolwork. She blew on it, and it drifted across a basin full of water dragon fables. I put my fox palm on the glass and left a print like frost melting. That girl didn't look up. Good. She had better things to do than validate a version of the future she couldn't yet imagine. Then I touched the glass where the bride stood. Her shoulders dropped. A ribbon untied itself. You can't hurry a knot you didn't tie. I stepped back and said my names until the mirrors fogged from it, and all I could see was the outline of me in the outline of me. After that, revelations wanted to happen quickly. The shrine likes climaxes. It pretends they are for you, they are for it. A show keeps belief oiled. The sacred sword called finally, not like a lover, like a road you've been avoiding, and then the flood recedes, and there it is, dirt soft, ruts ready to fill with your feet. I didn't take it at the stand. I went to the river. I went where the lilies nod around the stones, and the water still moves even when the fog sits heavy. I waded in calf deep, feeling silt work into the folds of the kimono lining like second skin. The sword slid into my fox palm as if I'd wrapped around it long ago. It was ugly. That's important. It was not a hero's blade. It was practical, with a nick near the guard where someone working a field had used it to pry something stubborn and lost leverage. I loved it immediately, for being honest. Purification isn't always water. Sometimes it is time. Sometimes it is apology. Sometimes it is refusing to polish the places that tell the truth. I stood there and told the blade what I would not do with it. I would not use it to make myself simple. I would not use it to cut my friends into reasons. I would not use it to punish a boy who wore a mask made of family law. I would not use it to make my mother into a symbol when she was a woman who woke up sore and went to bed sore and sometimes forgot she was a person between the two. The blade warmed in my hand. Not heat. Recognition. The shrine, of course, wanted blood anyway. It offered me an easy knife. Kill the parts of yourself that make old men talk too loud, and neighbors close shutters and lovers stutter. Easy knives always aim at your own throat. I wrapped the sword again and slung it across my back. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do with a weapon is not use it where everyone can see. Climaxes like 3, a bell, a cry, a door. The bell rang from the market and didn't stop. Not a vendor's rhythm. A warning. I ran. Rinko ran beside me, hair down, sleeves wet with river. Shu came from the other side, chest heaving, the whites of his eyes showing like a startled horse. We met at the square where the fox procession, men with masks and women with lacquered hair and steps short as breath, had assembled too early, as if someone had moved the clocks forward out of greed. The cry came from the shrine steps. Junko's voice, not the thin cloth voice from the last time she visited. The one from before, when she pinned my sleeves up so I could climb and told me to land on the ball of the foot so the shock wouldn't travel to my knees. She stood there with her hair unbound and her mouth terrified of itself. She said my name the way a person says, "Don't step there, the wood's rotten." Behind her, men carried the white bundle of the shiramuku, sleeves dragging, teeth beads clicking. The door, the one that is not a door but a limit, opened in the fog above the main street, a soft brightness with edges like torn cloth. The procession turned as one toward it. The town inhaled. I could have run. The edge of the town was a thought away, and I know now I would have found a road somewhere beyond the fog. Every place has roads. What we call borders are often just bad maps. If I had run then with Shu, we would have been 2 loud pieces in a world that wanted us to be quiet. We would have made it to a small city and eaten noodles so salty they felt like staying alive. We would have looked over our shoulders for years and pretended not to. We would have told each other we were free while our sentences were still written by that night. There are endings where that happens. I've seen them in the mirrors. But I was tired of roads that were escapes pretending to be choices. I wanted a choice that could survive a morning after the fog thinned. I walked up the steps. Everyone parted like they had rehearsed it with eyes closed. Junko's hands went to my shoulders like she'd forgotten how and remembered in the same breath. She said not to be stupid. I said I was done with being obedient. She shook, and I almost loved her enough to change my mind. Then I saw the seam at her neck, the little unthreading the shrine had left in its hurry to make her part of the story. I was not talking to my sister only. I was speaking to the mouth that had borrowed her throat. I turned to Fox Mask. We looked at each other the way people do who share a sentence neither of them wants to finish, and neither can leave unfinished. I said, "We can stop this. Not by burning it down. Not by kneeling to it either. By setting it where it belongs, in the past, with a stone on top so it doesn't blow open every time someone in this town is afraid of a girl who knows her own height." He hesitated. It was small. Half a breath. Half a blink. He had never been allowed to hesitate. Every man in our town is trained to confuse certainty with goodness. He took the half and made it whole. He reached up. He removed his mask. The world did not end. The lilies did not scream. The old men did not eat their tongues. A boy I knew stood there with a bruise the color of old plum at the hinge of his jaw, where tradition had held him and squeezed whenever he thought about refusing. He looked like someone who had been allowed to sleep one night in his life and had chosen to stand guard instead. He said, "Not like this." Then, because he had been taught well, he said it again louder so people could hear what they needed to answer with. "Not like this." The procession faltered. A machine is loudest when a gear slips. Rinko stepped forward, ruler straight, and announced that the ritual as performed did not meet the standards set down in the book she had read since she could read. She listed 3 errors. 1 was real. 2 she invented. The men in charge of checking such things nodded, uncertain, relieved to have a reason that sounded official. Shu, catching on, shouted that he'd seen a fox run across the path, a bad omen in exactly the way we needed it to be. An omen is just a story no one wants to argue with. The bell kept ringing. I realized why. The vendor had run away too fast and left it swinging. I loved that. Panic doing the work of a warning on its own. Junko whispered in my ear, my real sister, thin behind the borrowed voice, that she wanted to go home. Not to her husband's house, to our house, to the floor she had polished, to the window where she once hid a tiny tin of salt from our father, so there would always be a pinch for soup, even if he threw the bag in the canal after a storm of rage. I told her we could. We could go to any house we made. We could set a table with 2 bowls and rotate one halfway so steam lined up with steam. I unfastened the shiramuku. I folded it with respect and set it aside. I told the lilies they could keep their beautiful mouths shut for one night. They nodded, chastened. I spoke to the shrine and I used good language, the kind I'd learned from old women and midwives and the man who fixed geta straps. I said we have fulfilled the part that was learning. We decline the part that is erasure. We will not discard the past. We will refuse to be thrown away by it. The shrine is a house, and I am sweeping. You are welcome to keep what is yours. You must return what is mine. Sometimes the world listens because it is tired of being loud. The fog thinned enough to show the form of the streets again. The red bled back into green where grass was stubborn. The river remembered that it was not obligated to hold every reflection that demanded a place on its skin. The dolls in the breath room faced forward again, and I swear one of them looked relieved to be allowed to stare at nothing like the rest. Climax means stairs. Resolution means landing. The step down from that night was small and cracked, and I took it carefully. What happened then? The answers split depending on which mirror you put in front of them. There is a path where I ran with Shu, and we ate those salty noodles, and we grew old enough to be good at lying to ourselves gently. There is a path where I married the mask and learned to move like a river inside a coffin, and in that one, I looked serene for the photographs and never stopped screaming inside where only I could hear. There is a joke path where a radio made of tin and dreams turned into a beam of light, and I was lifted by a saucer and laughed because, yes, fine, let someone else write the sequel. These are all true in the way dreams are true. They belong to me because I thought them. They belong to the town because it taught me how to think. The path I live is this. I stayed long enough to make the ritual into something else. Kotoyuki and I annulled the thing our elders had arranged, not with curses, with paper, with stamps, with the same instruments that once would have bound me. The clerk at the ward office had a mole like a comma near his mouth and looked bored the way civil servants do when they are actually saving lives one form at a time. We bowed. We promised we would meet again as people, and not as roles if the world gave us a straight piece of road. He smiled then, a small, real smile I had not seen since we were children throwing stones at swallows and missing on purpose so the birds would stay. My mother watched me pack. She took the iron pot down from its hook and set it in my hands with a weight that felt like a blessing. She didn't apologize. I didn't ask. We are not a house that knows how to do that without hurting ourselves with the effort. She said rice burns on a high flame when you are distracted. She meant take care. She meant do not let your hunger run you. She meant right, but not so much you forget to eat. I kissed her cheek where a tiny lattice of broken veins made a map. I pressed my lips to the road there and learned it by heart. My father sat with his bottle and looked at the floor. I said his name. He flinched. That will have to do for now. Rinko hugged me like she was measuring the distance between my shoulder blades and memorizing the number. She said she would keep the rule book, but she might write in the margins. I told her margins were where the good notes live. We made a pact to tell each other when we started pretending again. Friends can save you years if they are honest about when you are lying and kind about why. Shu brought me a bag of chestnuts, roasted, split at the top like smiles. He said partner in a voice that did not ask me to go anywhere I did not want to go. He said he was sorry for the pills and the way his fear wore a hero's hat. He said he was learning that rescue is a story men tell themselves when they are afraid of being left behind. I told him I forgive what he didn't know yet, and I will not forgive the parts that should have known and didn't try. Both can be true. He nodded and didn't flinch. We will keep each other honest, or we will stop being each other's at all. That promise is a clean wind. Kodayuki and I met once more before I left. We walked the levee and pointed at boats like children for 5 breaths, and then we spoke like the people we had become. He said he might go to the city and work where masks are made of neon instead of lacquer. He said he wanted to see if his face worked there without anything over it. I told him cities have their own shrines. Be careful not to kneel to a different altar by accident. He laughed. He said if we meet again it will be because we pick, not because we are chosen. I said, agreed. We parted without drama at the bridge, which felt like the bravest thing we could do. You expect a neat lesson now. I did too for years because I was raised on proverbs and simple recipes. Rice, water, heat, patience. Do this and get that. Life keeps adding a line at the bottom. Or not. Here is what I know, written plain on the inside of my ribs where I can read it when I forget. Agency is not a crown you put on once. It is a verb you keep doing, sometimes badly, often tired, then again tomorrow. Freedom is not a door you kick down and leave swinging. It is a house you build with windows, and then you remember to open them when the air inside grows stale. Identity is not a mask you glue to your face. It is skin, and skin heals, and skin scars. And sometimes you press a new face to yours and speak through the seams until the seams learn your language. Tradition is not an enemy if it stops at your threshold and asks permission. It is a thief when it slips in through the back and opens your drawers and puts on your shirts and says they look better on it. You can love what raised you and refuse what would bury you. Both. That word is my favorite now. It's a door that swings both ways and doesn't hit you if you are careful. The monsters I fought had teeth and silk and names made of laughter that hurt. The worst monsters wore shoes to work and brought pens. I learned to kill neither when killing was a way to make the story simple. I learned to let some live on the other side of a line I drew and redraw every morning with chalk that washes off in rain. I keep the sword oiled but asleep. I keep the scabbard close. I listen for humming that isn't mine. Do I still smell the lilies? Yes, beauty keeps trying to kill me. Sometimes I let it sit at my table. I put its bowl halfway to mine. We line up steam. We talk without giving away our names. That is what it means to live with what nearly erased you. You do not banish it. You do not marry it. You invite it under good light and feed it until it is too soft to bite. Do I still say my name? When I wake and when I sleep and when I forget and when I remember. I am Hinako. I am also Hinako. The fox part of me, silent, decisive, teeth bared when necessary, sleeps at my feet when I write. The human part, mouth clumsy with feeling, eyes that wet and dry on their own time, watches the door. We trade shifts. We are not enemies anymore. Integration is a boring word for a miracle. The miracle is continuing. I am not the faceless bride, though sometimes I miss the way a mask made me feel untouchable. I am not the girl who ran with a boy because the world was too much for both of us. I am not the fugitive whose red pills turned her wedding into a butcher's list. In other mirrors, I am all of these. It matters that here, by this plain fire, I am the woman who sat in a room that breathed, straightened a doll's collar, listened for a sword's humming, and told a town politely and firmly to stop using my life to rehearse its fear. I live near water now, not the hot spring with its ghost dragon, but a river that minds its own business. I teach children to fold boats and not to apologize when theirs sink the first time. I write in the evenings until the oil runs out, and then I talk because words deserve air. I visit my mother when the road is dry and let her correct how I stack bowls, and we both pretend this matters more than the other things we can't say without bleeding. Sometimes I see a boy with a bruise turning lighter. Sometimes a man with a neon mask in his pocket he chooses not to wear. Sometimes a friend writes me a letter with margins full of rule changes, and I send back mine with a drawing of a ruler bent gently into a river. When the lilies bloom, I stand at the edge of the field and breathe through my mouth. I bring a small pair of shears, and I cut a path through for children who are shorter than the flowers, so they won't drown in beauty. I teach them to smell once, then step back. I show them how to leave offerings that are not themselves. I am not eloquent every day. Some mornings I say only the words necessary to keep a life going: rice, water, sweep, mend. Some nights I speak until my throat aches. Tonight I have spoken more than most nights because the fire asked, and because you listened without asking me to make it cleaner than it was. If you need a last line, take this and use it only when you must. Freedom is the slowest ritual I know, and I will not be hurried through it again. When someone tells you there are only 2 doors, check the wall for a seam. If you can't find it, make one with your name until the room learns to breathe. Partner, if you're out there and your pockets are full of chestnut skins and bad ideas, I am grateful for the days we shared a radio and a plan. Foxboy, if you walk neon streets and keep your face your own, I am glad we put down what was handed to us and left the table standing. Sister, if you ever want to come home to a house that isn't our father's, I have an iron pot and a habit of turning bowls halfway so the steam meets in the middle. The fire's low again. Time to let the wood go on becoming what heat asks it to be. Time to close my journal and give my eyes back to the dark. I will sleep with one hand open, the old fox curled near it, not as a weapon, as a witness. If the fog comes, I will greet it at the threshold and ask its name. If the lilies lean, I will tell them a story until their bright mouths forget to bite. Tomorrow I will sweep, mend, boil, write. I will pick. I will keep learning the shape of my own height. My name is Hinako Shimizu. I won't be told what to do. My choices are my own. And if you forget your name, come sit by this heat. We'll say them together until the masks remember who wears them.